Have you ever stopped to truly ask yourself what your life would look like if you were genuinely present in every single moment? If every morning began with a clear sense of purpose, and every decision was made with conviction, without guilt, without doubt, without regret. The truth is that most people are alive, but they are not awake. They are running on autopilot, spending their days trying to please everyone around them, reaching for control over what is outside while quietly abandoning what is inside a little more each day. And that is exactly why so many people feel exhausted, lost, always circling back to the same starting point, as if they wake up every morning trapped inside the same loop, with no idea how to break free. But today, I want to offer you something simple, something powerful, and something that takes real courage. Live like someone who has already chosen their own path. Live like someone who made a real decision to never abandon themselves again. The Stoics talked about this more than 2,000 years ago. While others chased validation from the world around them, they turned their attention back toward themselves. They built presence. They practiced discipline. They cultivated clarity. Because anyone who neglects their inner world will eventually crumble in the outer one. And that kind of shift begins with something small, a commitment to yourself. Write it down right now in the comments. Today I choose myself. And do not let that reminder stay buried in this video alone. Write it on your phone, tape it to your wall, fold it inside your wallet. Come back and read it tomorrow and the day after that. Because sometimes all we truly need is exactly this. A clear reminder that life shifts the moment you decide to shift. Just before we begin, I want to ask you for two things. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. That is the only way this kind of content can reach the people who need it most. Now let us get into it. 1. Stop living to be liked. Sometimes we do not even notice it, but so much of our lives are spent like someone reaching out their hand, waiting for a pat on the head, a compliment, a thumbs up, a "you're on the right track." For just a few seconds, life feels like it has meaning, and that feeling is addictive. But if you look closely and honestly, you will see it for what it really is: a trap. The more you chase approval, the further you drift from yourself. It is like a maze full of mirrors, but without a single exit. The Stoics spoke about this centuries ago. They understood that surrendering your sense of worth to other people's eyes is like building a house on the edge of the ocean. With every wave, another piece of it crumbles away. Seneca said that what matters is not what happens to you, but how you choose to respond. And that applies just as much to the opinions of others. Because every time you reshape your words to please someone, every time you hide what you think to avoid disappointment, every time you shrink yourself just to be accepted, you become smaller. And the worst part? Nobody even notices. Because the hunger for approval is a silent prison. It disguises itself as warmth, as recognition, as a single like. But underneath, it is a deal you make with your own insecurity. Outside opinion is volatile. Today they applaud you. Tomorrow, they have already forgotten you. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with you at all. It is about their mood, their pain, the kind of day they had. But your core does not shift with the wind. Your mind must be like a fortress, built steady on the ground of reason. Outside voices may knock at the door, but they should never shake your foundation. Epictetus was a slave, and still he said, "You are free the very moment you stop seeking the approval of others, because no one can hold captive a person who no longer needs to be accepted." And here is the truth that almost no one is willing to hear. A person who lives to be liked is always one step away from betraying themselves. You were not made to fit into someone else's mold. You were made to grow strong from the inside, even when no one is clapping for you on the outside. Think of a tree standing in an open field. The wind comes at it from every direction, but it never asks the wind to stop. It simply grows, with deep roots, with its own direction, with quiet presence. Be that tree. Grow without asking for permission, even when no one is watching. And the next time you feel that urge to change who you are, just to win someone's approval, stop and ask yourself, am I being true to myself, or am I just trying to avoid rejection? Because the peace you are looking for will never come from outside you. It begins the moment you decide to respect the person staring back at you in the mirror. And if this is landing for you, leave a comment. My freedom does not depend on applause. That line is more than a phrase. It is a daily reminder. The worth you carry inside you, no one gave it to you, and no one can take it away. 2. Silence the noise. We are living inside an invisible battlefield. The war being fought here is not for land or power. It is for your attention. Every notification that buzzes, every open tab sitting in your browser, every video that slides into your feed, all of it seems harmless. But beneath the surface, each one is stealing a piece of your presence, and before you realize what has happened, you no longer know where you were or who you are. Marcus Aurelius said, "Stop wasting time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." That sentence seems simple at first glance, but it holds something brutal inside it. Stop getting lost in what is noise and start living in what is essential. Because every distraction is a thread pulling your mind further away from itself. If you do not cut those threads, you will soon find yourself completely disconnected from who you actually are. Distractions are treacherous. They do not shout. They whisper. They settle in like weeds, quiet and invisible, until they have choked out everything else. At first, it is just a quick video, a glance at the feed, a conversation that does not really matter. But when you finally look up, you have spent hours living inside someone else's life and completely forgot about your own. A mind without focus becomes a fogged mirror. You look at it, and you do not recognize yourself. Everything seems blurry, dim, out of reach. And it is in that clouded reflection where anxiety is born, where exhaustion takes root, and where you lose your sense of direction entirely. The Stoics understood that inner clarity depends on one thing above everything else: total presence in each action. And that kind of presence only exists when there is silence underneath. Without focus, you are a ship adrift on the open sea, carried wherever the current decides to take you. But when you begin to clear the ground of your attention, you uncover what was buried beneath the noise. Your intuition, your vision, your deepest source of strength. Look honestly at your daily habits. What are you doing every single day that exhausts you without ever truly transforming you? Endless scrolling, news that only agitates you, drama that does not even belong to you, shopping sites you visit for no real reason. The Stoics called this a voluntary surrender of freedom, because when you fail to choose where your energy goes, the world makes that choice for you. And for them, discipline was never a prison. It was a lighthouse. It meant knowing how to say no to what distracts you so you could say yes to what actually builds you. Start with something simple. Choose one moment in your day to disconnect completely. No phone, no sound, no one else around. In the first few minutes, you will feel restless, like someone trying to breathe above the waterline. But if you hold through it, something new will surface. A different kind of silence, one that does not suffocate you, but settles you. A space where your own mind can finally hear itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, The soul is dyed the color of its thoughts. If those thoughts are interrupted constantly, your soul dims. But when you choose what enters, what stays, and what is allowed to leave, everything shifts. Your direction changes. Your presence deepens. Your strength comes back to life. In a world engineered to steal your attention, choosing to protect your focus is an act of genuine courage. It is like building an invisible fortress inside yourself, and you are the only one who gets to decide who comes through the gates. This is not about cutting out everything that brings you joy. It is about asking yourself a clear and honest question. Does this nourish me, or does it just numb me? Does this bring me closer to the person I want to become, or is it just a way of avoiding the discomfort of not being there yet? The answers to those questions have the power to redirect your entire life, because whoever masters their attention masters their future. 3. Build your willpower. There are days when everything feels like it is out of place, a mistake that weighs on you too heavily, a challenge that wears you down completely, a disappointment that hits somewhere deep. And almost without noticing it, you start asking, why is this happening to me? In that moment, blaming the world feels like the easiest road to take. Blaming the circumstances, the people around you, the hand you were dealt. But every time you transfer the blame, you also transfer your power. Stoicism teaches that taking responsibility is not a punishment. It is freedom. It is the decision to hold the wheel, even in the middle of a storm. You cannot control the winds, but you can adjust the sails, and that awareness alone changes everything. Think of your life as a ship on open water. Sometimes the sky goes dark. The waves pound from all sides. Everything around you seems to be pushing you under. But the wheel is right there, and in some form it always has been. The only real question is whether you are going to hold it. When you run from responsibility, you let go of that wheel in the middle of the chaos. You spin in circles, subject to whatever chance decides to bring your way. But when you choose to steer, even with fear in your chest, even without certainty, you find a strength that does not belong to anyone else and does not depend on anything outside of you. Just you. And yes, taking hold of that requires courage. Courage to acknowledge where you fell short, when you stayed silent, when you should have spoken, when you settled for less than you deserved. But that kind of honesty with yourself is the very thing that makes you stronger, because it is not about punishing yourself for what went wrong. It is about seeing clearly, recognizing the patterns, confronting the old beliefs you have been carrying, understanding that every small decision you make is quietly building the road you are walking on. And that road does not only belong to you. Your choices ripple outward. They shape the people around you, influence the environments you walk into, build connections, or quietly burn bridges. Being responsible is developing awareness. It is understanding that your willpower is not simply about resisting temptation. It is about keeping your course, even when everything around you seems to be pushing you in the opposite direction. The more you own the consequences of your decisions, the more you become worthy of your own respect. Real self-worth is born there, not from motivational phrases or surface-level affirmations, but from living in alignment with what you actually believe. That brings clarity. That creates stability in the face of failure, because you stop seeing setbacks as endings and start seeing them as part of the process. A Stoic does not wait for ideal conditions to act. He acts with what he has, plays his part, regardless of whether anyone else around him is willing to do the same with that same level of integrity. He does not wait for guarantees, recognition, or reward. As Marcus Aurelius said, we must learn to do good and regard it as its own reward. The good act itself is already enough. Acting from that place is a sign of clarity and of real inner strength. It is having certainty about what you are building, and above all, about who you are in the process of becoming. So today, I want to offer you an invitation, not to be perfect, but to be real, to hold the wheel with both hands, to become the author of your own story, even on the difficult pages, even on the overcast days. The freedom you have been searching for is not hiding inside an achievement, or a title, or a relationship. It begins the moment you stop running and choose to act like someone who already understands. It is not the wind that determines the direction. It is your hand on the wheel. Hold it firmly. The sea will always be unstable, but you do not have to be. 4. Guard your emotional energy. Picture a diver. He can be in paradise, surrounded by crystal clear water, with every beautiful thing in the world visible around him. But if his oxygen runs out, the dive is over. Everything is over. The same thing happens with your emotional energy. You can be surrounded by great opportunities, interesting people, incredible ideas. But if you are running on empty inside, none of it matters. Your mind shuts down, your body responds poorly, and even the good things start feeling like a burden. The problem is that almost no one pays attention to that invisible air keeping them afloat. It gets spent in pointless conversations, in arguments that lead nowhere, in worries that change absolutely nothing. And by the time you notice, you are already reacting with irritability, making rushed decisions, pulling away from the people who actually matter. All because you ran out of emotional breath. Epictetus said, "What matters is not what happens to you, but how you respond." And every impulsive reaction you give is like releasing air from a tank beneath the water. You cannot see it leaving, but you are losing the calm you are going to need later. The biggest emotional mistake a person can make is spending energy on things that do not even deserve your silence. To protect your energy, you do not have to retreat from the world entirely. But you do need to learn not to give yourself away completely to everything that appears in front of you. Engrave this into your mind. Not everything deserves your explanation. Not every criticism deserves a response. And not every noise from outside has to become chaos on the inside. There are people who drain you simply by being near you. There are topics that seem innocent, but rob you of your peace within seconds. And there are small habits, like checking your phone every 5 minutes, that bleed your clarity dry without you ever realizing it. So start paying attention. After spending time with certain people, do you feel lighter or heavier? After visiting certain places, do you come back with energy or completely drained? If the answer is negative, you are wasting oxygen. And the diver who wastes oxygen out of vanity, pride, or distraction is the same one who has to surface before reaching the deepest and most beautiful part of the dive. Do not let that happen to your life. Do not throw away your immersion on noise that does not deserve even a second of your time. The greatest emotional protection is silence. The most powerful response is steady presence. And the most efficient way to save your energy is to choose with real intention where you actually want to be. When you learn to care for your emotional energy, you breathe better. You think more clearly. You act from a stronger place. And above all, you discover that you still have reserves when everyone else around you has already gone under. So from this point forward, every time you are about to react, drain yourself, justify yourself, or get irritated, ask yourself this one question. Is this worth the air of my dive? If the answer is no, just breathe and keep going deeper. You carry everything you need inside you to live an extraordinary life. The Stoics reminded us that what separates human beings from everything else is not strength or speed. It is awareness, the capacity to think, to choose, to resist acting on impulse. And every time you give that up, when you run on autopilot, when you repeat what weakens you, you are throwing away the most powerful resource you possess, the mind that could set you free. 5. Direct your energy toward what builds you. Wake up. Put out fires. Answer everyone. Try to keep everyone happy. Do 10 things at once. End the day feeling like you did nothing that was actually for you. Does that sound familiar? That is the routine most people are living inside. Busy but hollow, exhausted but unproductive, surrounded by stimulation, but completely disconnected from themselves. And what happens to someone who lives permanently on that autopilot? They become increasingly fragile on the inside. Because strength is not about how hard you work. It is about where your efforts are pointed. Seneca said, "If a man does not know which port he is sailing toward, no wind will be favorable to him." Which means if you are not actively choosing what strengthens you, the world will choose what exhausts you instead. You cannot keep spending the best hours of your day on things that do not sustain your soul. You cannot keep trading your vital energy for tasks you resent, for conversations that leave you darker, for habits that only leave you more worn down than before. Want to know where you will be 6 months from now? Look at where you are directing your attention today. Inner strength is built through small but consistent decisions. Reading something that challenges how you think. Listening to something that fills you back up. Training your body even when you have no motivation. Eating well. Respecting your sleep. Learning to set boundaries. All of that seems straightforward, but none of it is easy to practice consistently because most of those things require you to break the cycle of distraction and self-abandonment. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself, "You have power over your mind, not over events. Understand this, and you will find strength. Your true power is one step of awareness away. You can train your mind to cultivate what builds you and stop feeding what silently destroys you. With emotional maturity, you come to understand that part of real growth is knowing what to cut. There are habits that appear harmless, but are eating through your foundation. There are people who smile at you and disorder everything inside you. There are thoughts that repeat so often they become beliefs, and they keep you locked inside a version of yourself that you should have already left behind. Guard your mind the way you would guard the foundation of a building, because everything else rests on it when the next tremor arrives. Getting stronger means treating yourself with seriousness, making decisions like someone who knows what they are worth, stopping the negotiation of your peace in exchange for emotional scraps. Remember this: what you feed grows, and what grows begins to control you. So the question that remains is this: what have you been feeding inside yourself? 6. Learn to be alone without feeling lost. There are people who will choose any company, even the most empty kind, before they face their own silence. They keep themselves surrounded by noise, by screens, by voices, by constant movement, because sitting with themselves terrifies them. Because they are afraid that if they do, they will discover they do not know what to do inside their own mind. But whoever cannot tolerate their own presence will always be a prisoner of someone else's. Stoicism teaches that true freedom begins when you stop depending on the outside world to feel complete. Marcus Aurelius said, "The refuge is to turn inward." And he was not talking about withdrawing from the world. He was talking about anchoring yourself to something that does not shake when the world does. Being alone is not isolation. It is training. It is where you create space to truly know yourself, where you stop performing and actually start to meet yourself. We almost always trade that inward journey for company, for invisible vices, for comfortable distractions. But the more you run from yourself, the more lost you feel, even when you are surrounded by people. Solitude is only frightening when your own mind has become an unlivable place. But when you clean that space out, when you stop running, when you face your own emptiness head-on, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop searching the world for what you always needed to find in yourself. Epictetus said, "You become unstoppable when you stop depending on what you cannot control. And few things are further outside your control than the presence, the affection, or the validation of another person." Feeling comfortable in your own company is what stops you from begging for attention, from forcing connections that have already died, from treating emotional scraps as if they were feasts. It is also what prepares you for genuine love, because healthy relationships grow between two complete people who choose each other, not between two empty people trying to fill themselves through one another. Want to start training this? Begin with 10 minutes a day. Just you with yourself. Maybe anxiety surfaces. Maybe guilt, old memories, unanswered questions. Let them come. Do not try to fix them. Only observe. You are meeting what has been hiding behind all the rushing. And with time, you will begin to notice that silence is not emptiness. It is shelter. It is fertile ground where a kind of clarity grows that could never reach you any other way. Being alone is the first step toward never feeling incomplete in the middle of a crowd. Because the person who finds peace in their own company never needs the world again to feel at home. 7. Cut the habits that weaken you. Have you ever watched how a leak starts? First, it is just a subtle stain on the ceiling. Then the mold appears, a strange smell. The paint begins to peel away, and slowly the structure itself starts to give. By the time you pay attention to it, it is no longer a cosmetic issue. It is a structural risk. Bad habits work exactly the same way. They enter as a small detail. They spread quietly. And before long, they are corroding your strength from the inside out. And it does not help to say, it is just a mild vice. Just a phase. Everyone does it. Because what begins as an innocent concession always ends in complete loss of control. The greatest problem with a bad habit is not the time it consumes. It is the identity it creates. Because the more you repeat a weak behavior, the more you begin to see yourself as a weak person. And at that point, it is no longer about procrastination. It is about believing you are the kind of person who never sees anything through. Want real change? Stop trying to fight enormous enemies and start cutting off the small permissions. The excuse you always return to. The routine you keep telling yourself still works. The app that steals 3 hours of your day. The conversation that drains you and yet you keep going back to. The self-sabotage disguised as a well-deserved rest. You are not fighting a dragon. You are fighting a button, a habit, a familiar gesture, and a single decision. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Because bad habits are comfortable. They are predictable. They ask nothing of you, except everything. Your discipline, your energy, and your future. So instead of trying to become an entirely new person overnight, choose one specific thing that is weakening you right now, and cut it without mercy. Because when you sever what has been dragging you backward, you do not only move faster, you begin to actually like the person you are becoming along the way. Leave a comment right now. Today I cut without mercy. As Seneca said, seek the satisfaction of watching your vices die before you do. Every weakness you overcome is one more step toward interior freedom. 8. Replace excess with essence. There are people who live as if they are trying to keep 10 plates spinning at once. They think it looks impressive. Stay busy. Respond instantly. Do more. Produce without stopping. But do you know what happens to a tired juggler? Everything crashes. And then, on top of that, they blame themselves for failing to hold up the impossible. Here is the truth. No one can sustain a life divided between 1,000 tasks, 1,000 pressures, 1,000 competing goals. That is not productivity. That is exhaustion wearing an elegant name. Seneca already said it. We do not have too little time. We waste too much of it. And most people do not waste theirs on grand excesses. They waste it on small distractions that quietly become routine. Someone who does everything feels permanently tired and deep down feels like they experienced nothing. You do not need to do more. You need to do it better. Instead of trying to multitask everything, choose to be direct, deep, and focused. Because when you are fully in something, even a simple action becomes something solid. But when you fragment yourself, everything you touch turns to dust. Want to know what actually builds you? A conversation where you genuinely listen. Work carried out with real intention. A pause that is not an escape, but a moment of awareness. A no spoken with steadiness. That is quality. That is what it means to move with direction. And here is a key point worth holding on to. Quality does not come from calm conditions. It comes from the decision to be present, even when everything around you is demanding urgency. When you choose quality, you stop being just another runner in the race. You slow down on the inside. You stop fragmenting and start building something that lasts. The person who chooses depth over volume is not behind. They are ahead of everyone who is still confusing movement with progress. Fill your life with less of what empties you and more of what returns you to yourself. Because a life lived with full presence, even if slower, even if simpler, carries more meaning than 1,000 busy days spent running away from silence.